So here we are with our first tips and tricks session. We've got an expert panel here with lots of great ideas to share with you and the potential of Q&A. Though realizing we're on the first class session, you may be watching this recorded as opposed to live, but that's fine. Hopefully you will benefit from our wisdom. So we'll start off here with Caitlin with some ideas, and then we'll kind of go with the flow here.
Thank you. All right, let me share my screen real quick and we'll get started. I'm going to show a sort of overview of what everything goes on, basically how to use everything. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so first off, I wanted to go over this folder section on the left side of your screen where you can kind of navigate throughout the class, like certain labs you wanted to get to. So if you are on the general screen, you just kind of have to work your way through it. So obviously click data science, and we are fall 2024. And just as an example, we're looking for lab 1, that you'll click on lab 1. And you always click the orange one that says lab 1, and that's the actual lab. So that will show up. Or it'll also show up on the home page as well, where it just says a link to. But if you ever get lost, then there's that option as well. But I also just want to go through what these mean up here as well. So obviously we have our save icon, but if you wanted to add a new cell, you could click this add button at the top, and that adds a new one, as you can see. And there are a few other tools that we don't really use except for the run button, which is pretty important, this play button, or you can hit run at the top here instead if you wanted to run a certain selection of cells, or you wanted to run all of them, or you say you selected a certain cell, you want to run everything above it, you can do that as well. So that's an option. And then in terms of saving, you just go to File, and there's two ways you're going to save it. So when you do save and export notebook as, you do HTML. And then when you're submitting the other way, you just hit download, and that will also be another way you'll submit your labs from here on out. But just to give a quick overview of like kind of what we're working with here, I just want to give an example of what a code cell looks like versus a markdown. So as you can see, as I start typing, you'll see a function being created, as well as a change in color of the lettering. That'll help indicate that there is a function, that there's a code that will be ready to run. So when you do run it, it works that way. But if you did the same thing for a markdown cell, it wouldn't do anything. It just comes up as regular words here. It's not like actual coding. So that's kind of how you know the difference between a markdown cell and a coding cell. The code, obviously, that's where you're writing code and you're kind of working with functions and that sort of thing. Markdown is just for you to type general messages and like the type of cells that you'll put in, like responses to open-ended questions, that sort of thing for the end of the lab. But for the most part, I think that's really everything I wanted to go over for that. Professor Smith, did you have anything else, maybe?
No, that's a super overview of these aspects. I think that's super because just getting through the Jupyter Notebook, that's lab 00, and you're right. In class, we see people having some challenges here and there, but this will help. So great. Okay, so super. So moving forward, yeah, who wants to jump in?
I can go. Let me share my screen really quickly.
Super, super.
So this is an online compiler where you can run snippets of like Python code. It'll help you isolate which part is the code and which part is the explanations that you can see on the Jupyter Notebook. The first thing I want to go over is our comments. If you do like a hashtag symbol, you can, anything you write won't be run. Like generally you might want to put like your name, the class you're taking, CIS something, or like your professor, the date is generally some of the things that you want to include on some coding assignments. And it's also used to just explain longer, when you do code longer segments, you might not remember which segment of the code does which particular thing. And what comments does is to help you, is to act as a reminder. Oh, this snippet of the code might be where you're adding certain things. This snippet of the code is where you're saving the results to a variable. And that gets exponentially more helpful when, like I said, there's a lot more code going on, and it'll basically just help you remember what happens where. The next thing I want to go over are print statements. Like she showed us earlier, the general print statement looks like this. And what's really important are the parentheses and the quotation marks. Is what's useful about a compiler is you can just simply click the run button and the results show up on the other side. And like I said, that's the most important are the quotations and the parentheses. Whatever are in between the two gets printed out to the screen. It's pretty straightforward. My name is blank, right? For example, and that's what prints out. Something else you can do is save a string to a variable. You can be like, my name, and then you set it equal to your name. And generally this could be a little bit more complicated, and you might be like, oh, why can't I just do print and then your name anyways? Doesn't it do the same thing? Yes, it does the same thing in this example, but in cases where this can be a longer string, like an address, for example, that's when it gets easier to save it to a variable. And when you do print it out, you can just type the variable name and it'll also run, right? So instead of, it's useful because you can save longer snippets of text and simplify it to that variable name only. And it becomes useful when there's a lot of repetition, especially in the beginning. It'll help a lot of repetition. And so if you need to keep typing the same thing, it might be easier to save in a variable. And that allows you to print it easier. I think that's about it for printing and variables that I saw in the first lab. So I'll hand it over to one of you guys.
Super.
Yeah,
That is,
I was going to
Yep.
say, I think that's a perfect segue into what I was going to do, because like what I'm going to show is variables and the repetition aspect of it, where we reuse those same variables over. So I'll share my screen now.
Super.
All right. Do you see my Juniper application open?
Yeah, it looks good. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to do the calculations for the leap year. But essentially, right here, you can see in cell 15, I have all of my variables established. And yeah, so I set up the seconds in a minute, the minutes in an hour, hours in a day, days in a year. I looked all that stuff up beforehand because I figured it would save time.
Sure.
But walking through each of the functions, if we look at number 2, we calculate the seconds in a day, which is just the seconds in a minute multiplied by the minutes in an hour multiplied by the hours in a day. And then I just set up basic print statements to print out each. So if you look over here, this is where your results will print out. So we have our seconds in a day, we have our seconds in a month, and then we have our seconds in a year. So what I want to walk through is how to work through basic multiplication, how to use parentheses, and how to set up a print statement. So I'll do that now. So what I will do is set up the variable seconds in a leap year. And also what I like to do is I either like to do the underscore to separate the words, or I'll do camel case. It's a preference thing, but pretty much it just makes it easier to read. So let's put this in parentheses where I do seconds in a day. Again, reusing variables. This is why it's better to use the variables versus the numbers themselves when you're repeating. So seconds in a day. Okay, and then we will multiply that by days in a year. And then the only difference between a leap year and a regular year is that there's an additional day in February. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the an additional seconds in a day. I think this is right. Seconds in a day. And then what we will do is just run it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. One more thing. We have to set up our print statement.
Yep.
So our print statement will say seconds in a leap year. And the comma just lets you know we're going to put the variable afterwards. And yeah, the comma is sort of the separator there. Seconds in a leap year. And now we should be able to run this program, and the seconds in a leap year should print. And all that looks good to me. I don't know if you guys see anything that I missed here, but that's what I think the highlight here is how to use multiplication. We're going to use the asterisk for multiplication, and then we're able to build functions the same way if we were to handwrite a function, but the syntax is different in Python. So this is an example of how that's done.
Super. What a great example. Yeah, all of yours. That's super and highly relevant, definitely to Lab 1. And just keeping the momentum going, even building toward the next class. Everyone will be working on Lab 1 in the coming days, so this is great. And hopefully this short video will be helpful to people. I do like showing the compiler. That was very helpful because the point is, the more perspectives people see the things from, they realize it's really all the same, and it may help people trigger in their memory or learning what's actually going on, as opposed to getting caught up, for instance, with the interface. So to help them with the interface, but also to remove the interface, I think that's great. So hopefully together this helps. Any other tips you might share? Maybe particularly Caitlin, in this early going, remembering back to what you might have experienced the first days of class that confused you.
Yeah, honestly, I think when I first started, I was just overwhelmed. It just was because I was someone who didn't have any sort of programming experience, and I know this is a requirement for biology majors. So those of whom who've never had that experience and have to take this class are probably a little overwhelmed, but it's best to just ask for help. Like, we're here for a reason, to help you, and we promise to help you make this as seamless as possible and make it so that you actually know what's going on. But like I said, just ask questions, take it one step at a time. These first few labs are here to kind of build the foundation for everything you're learning. So I feel like it's a huge help. Just make sure you're reading it, and asking questions.
Super, super. Well, I think that's a super way to conclude things, unless any of you have any other things to share. Future sessions, we may have a little bit more Q&A at the end, but I think this is super.